My sister-in-law called the cops on me for abandoning my kids after I helped her for 3 years. But when she started exploiting my 62-year-old mom as a free babysitter, I did exactly the same and left them homeless. I'm 29 years old. I work with children professionally. And what happened a few months ago with my sister-in-law Tiffany basically destroyed whatever relationship was left between our families. The truth is, I still get furious when I think about it all. But I guess I need to get this whole story off my chest because people keep asking me why I don't talk to my brother David anymore, and it's like, where do I even start? Because this wasn't something that happened overnight, you know? It was a buildup of 3 years of favors, of mutual help, and of one person who simply doesn't know what responsibility or consequences mean. It all started well. Incredibly well, actually. We're talking March 2020, when the whole world was going crazy with the pandemic and nobody knew what to do with kids because schools closed and daycares too. Tiffany and I had kids around the same ages. She had two and I had one at the time, and we both worked, so this idea came up to take turns watching the kids. Like, she'd keep mine certain days and I'd keep hers other days. And it worked perfectly. You know what I mean? It was convenient for both of us. The kids got along well, and honestly, I thought it was one of those good things that come out of bad situations. I even started thinking that Tiffany and I were becoming closer, like real friends, not just sisters-in-law by obligation. For 3 full years, this worked without major problems. Obviously, there were complicated days, when the kids misbehaved or someone had to work late, but nothing we couldn't solve with a quick call or a text. I work with children professionally, so for me, it wasn't that big a deal to watch 2 or 3 more. Really. And Tiffany worked part-time doing I don't know what, something with sales or customer service. I never really understood her schedule, but it didn't matter much either. The point is we had this system, this unwritten agreement that we both respected. Or so I thought. My mom lived close to, both of us, like 15 minutes from my house and 20 from Tiffany's, and she was super cool with everyone, always willing to help. Sometimes when one of us had an emergency or something unexpected, Mom was the automatic plan B. She never complained. She loved spending time with her grandkids, but I always tried not to take advantage because I knew she had her own things, her friends, her activities. Tiffany had a different relationship with my mom, let's say. Like, she saw my mom more as an available resource than as a person with boundaries, you know what I mean? So we get to that day in September last year. We'd had a stupid argument. I don't even remember exactly about what. I think it was something about one of her kids breaking my kid's toy and she didn't want to replace it or something. Basically a silly thing. We sent each other some snippy messages. Nothing major. The kind of thing that normally gets resolved in a day or two when you both calm down. I had to work that day. It was a Thursday. And like always, Thursdays were Tiffany's days. So I got up early, got the kids ready, packed their lunches and everything, and took them to Tiffany's house like we'd literally been doing for 3 years. Here's the thing, and this is important. I didn't see the message she sent me that morning. She sent it like at 6 in the morning saying she wasn't going to watch the kids that day because she was still upset about our argument from the day before. 6 in the morning? I was already in the shower, getting ready for work. My phone was in the kitchen. I didn't check it until I was already in the car with the kids. I got to her house around 7:30, knocked on the door. Nobody answered, so I did what I'd done 1,000 times before. When she was busy with something inside, I left the kids on the porch and left. The kids knew the house perfectly. They knew where everything was. And Tiffany always left the door unlocked in the mornings when she knew we were coming. I got to work and was in the middle of a meeting. One of those you can't postpone or step out to check your phone. When suddenly, my cell wouldn't stop ringing. Like call after call, messages, notifications, all at the same time. As soon as the meeting ended, I checked and almost had a heart attack. Tiffany had sent me like 20 hysterical messages. My mom was calling me super worried, and there was a message from an unknown number that turned out to be from a police officer. Police. The word didn't even process in my head at first. I ran out of work, didn't even tell anyone properly, just grabbed my things and left. I drove like crazy back to Tiffany's house, and when I got there were 2 patrol cars parked outside with their lights on. My kids were sitting on the porch crying with a neighbor consoling them. And Tiffany was at the door talking to the officers with that victim face she knows how to put on so well. My heart was literally in my throat. I felt like I was going to throw up right there in the street. I got out of the car running, and one of the officers stopped me before I could get to my kids. He explained the situation to me, that there'd been a call about child abandonment, that the lady of the house, meaning Tiffany, had reported that I'd left my kids without her consent. I was in complete shock. Like I couldn't even speak properly, trying to explain to him that this was a misunderstanding, that we had a 3-year agreement, that we always did this, that I didn't see her message. The officer was pretty reasonable, actually. I think he realized quickly that this was family drama more than a real abandonment case. But he still told me that technically I had left minors on private property without confirming someone was available to receive them. Tiffany was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was the worst person in the world. She didn't say anything. Literally nothing. Just stared at me. My kids ran to me. As soon as the officer let me approach, and they were shaking, asking me why there were police, if they'd done something wrong. My oldest son, who's 7, told me they'd been knocking on the door for half an hour before a neighbor saw them and called Tiffany. Half an hour. 30 minutes. My kids were alone on a porch knocking on a door, nobody would open, and Tiffany was inside. I know because her car was there, simply ignoring them. The officers finally determined it was a communication issue. They didn't file any official reports, but they warned me to be more careful in the future about confirming these things. They warned me. Can you believe it? As if I was the irresponsible one, when for 3 full years this had never been a problem. I got in the car with my kids, didn't even look at Tiffany when I left, and drove back home in complete silence because I didn't trust my voice to speak without exploding. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down and really processed what had happened. Tiffany hadn't just decided not to watch my kids that day, which honestly would have been fine if she'd given me notice with decent time, but she called the police. She put me in a situation where I, who work professionally with children, could have had a social services report filed against me. I could have lost my job. I could have lost custody of my own children if this had escalated. And all because of what? Because she was angry about an argument over a broken toy? I blocked her that same night. From everything. Phone, social media, everything. I sent her one single message before blocking her, saying that our childcare arrangement was permanently terminated and that I'd never trust her again with anything related to my kids. I didn't wait for a response. I just blocked her. My brother David called me like 2 hours later, late at night, and started with the typical speech about how I was overreacting, that Tiffany was just upset, that we had to be family and work this out. I cut him off mid-sentence and told him exactly what I thought, that his wife had put my career and my children's well-being at risk over a tantrum, and that if he couldn't see how toxic that was, then he was part of the problem too. I hung up and didn't wait for a response either. About a week later, Mom called me worried. Turns out Tiffany, without the childcare arrangement with me, had quit her job. Just quit. She didn't look for daycare, didn't make other arrangements, just decided that without my free help she couldn't work, and that was that. And guess where she started leaving her kids 3 days a week, sometimes 4, with my mom, who's 62 years old and has her own health problems. Mom told me about it like it was something casual. Like, oh yeah, Tiffany brings me the kids Tuesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays. And I froze. I asked her if Tiffany was paying her anything, like a normal babysitter. And Mom laughed like I'd said something ridiculous. Of course she's not paying her. She's their grandmother, she told me. I tried to explain to Mom that this wasn't okay, that Tiffany was using her, that she had no obligation to watch those kids just because Tiffany decided to quit her job out of laziness. But Mom is too good, too willing to help, and she told me the kids weren't at fault and that she wasn't going to leave them without care. Which technically was true. The kids weren't at fault. But it also wasn't my mom's responsibility to fix the problems Tiffany created for herself. The next 2 months were horrible. Every time I talked to Mom, she sounded more and more tired. She'd tell me Tiffany's kids were exhausting, that they wouldn't listen, that they made messes in her house, that she didn't have the energy to keep up with them. And I could hear it in her voice, That kind of deep tiredness that doesn't go away with a night's sleep. I kept insisting she tell Tiffany no, but Mom simply couldn't. She felt it would be cruel to the kids, and Tiffany took perfect advantage of that. Then Mom started having blood pressure problems. Her blood pressure shot up to dangerous levels, like numbers that when she told me I had to Google because I couldn't believe they were real. Her doctor told her she had to reduce stress immediately, that she was at risk for serious things, heart attacks, strokes, those words nobody wants to hear about their mom. Mom told me almost apologetically, saying it was probably just age or diet or anything other than what it really was, which was the stress of watching two other people's kids 3 or 4 days a week without help. I went straight to Tiffany's house. Didn't even call first, just showed up one afternoon after work, knocked on the door, and when she opened, I told her everything I had to say. That Mom was in the hospital because of her, that her blood pressure was through the roof because she was too selfish to find real care for her own children, that she was literally killing my mom because she didn't want to spend money on daycare or a babysitter. Tiffany looked at me like I was crazy, told me I was being dramatic, that Mom was fine and if she had health problems, it was because she was older, not from watching her grandchildren. Her grandchildren. As if being a grandmother came with the automatic obligation to be a free full-time babysitter. David came out from inside the house in the middle of our argument and tried to calm me down, telling me to lower my voice, that the neighbors were going to hear. I told him I didn't give a damn if the neighbors heard, that I was tired of him and his wife manipulating and using the whole family, and that if something happened to Mom because of them, I'd never forgive them. I left before they could say anything else because I knew if I stayed I was going to say worse things. Mom had to go to the hospital again like 2 weeks later. This time it was more serious. The doctor told her she was on the verge of a stroke, that if she didn't make drastic changes in her life immediately, the consequences were going to be permanent. That doctor, bless him, asked her directly what was causing her so much stress, and Mom finally admitted about watching the kids. The doctor told her, and I quote because Mom repeated it to me word for word, "If you keep doing this, you're going to end up with a stroke that leaves you paralyzed or worse, and the decision is yours, but medically I'm telling you that you have to stop." That was what Mom needed to hear, apparently. The medical authority telling her it wasn't selfishness but necessity. She called me that night from the hospital and told me she was going to tell Tiffany she couldn't watch the kids anymore. I almost cried with relief, told her please do it, that I supported her completely, that this was the right thing. Mom told Tiffany the next day. She explained about the hospital, what the doctor said, everything. And Tiffany, you know what she did? Said, she understood, that it wasn't a problem, that she was going to make other arrangements. She sounded so reasonable, so understanding. Mom felt relieved. I felt relieved. We thought finally, Tiffany was going to act like a responsible adult. 3 days later, Tiffany left her kids at Mom's door at 7 in the morning, rang the doorbell and left. Mom called me crying, saying she didn't know what to do, that the kids were outside in the cold and she couldn't just ignore them. I told her not to open the door, to call Tiffany and tell her to come get them immediately. Tiffany didn't answer the phone. Obviously. I drove there as fast as I could. The kids were inside already, because Mom couldn't leave them outside. They were eating cereal in the kitchen with no idea what was really happening. I called Tiffany from my phone. She didn't answer either. I sent her a message saying if she didn't come for her kids in the next hour, I was going to call the police for child abandonment. Exactly what she did to me. And you know what? That's exactly what I did. I waited an hour. Tiffany didn't show up, didn't call, nothing. I called the police and reported that someone had left children on my mother's property without her consent and had left. 2 officers came, took the report, Mom explained the situation, the doctor had documented everything in her medical records, so there was real evidence of the harm this was causing. The officers went to Tiffany's house. I don't know exactly what they told her, but Mom told me later that they came back and said they'd spoken with the children's mother and that she'd been warned that she couldn't leave her children with someone who couldn't or wouldn't care for them. Tiffany had to go get her kids. She arrived like 2 hours later fuming, looked at me with a hatred I hadn't seen before, but didn't say anything in front of the officers. She just grabbed her kids and left. You'd think that would be enough, right? That any normal person would understand the message. But Tiffany isn't normal. A week later, she did exactly the same thing, left the kids and took off. This time, I didn't even wait. I called the police immediately. And the next time, and the time after that. Like 4 times total, they had to go talk to her, warning her that this was abandonment, that they could take custody away if she continued. While all this was happening, David started showing up at Mom's house. At first, he'd just come to pick up the kids when Tiffany left them and the police called, but then he started staying longer, sometimes hours, sometimes entire days. Mom told me that he and Tiffany were fighting constantly, that the house was total chaos, that Tiffany screamed all the time and David didn't know what to do anymore. Part of me felt sorry for my brother, but the other part, the bigger part, thought that he'd allowed his wife to get to this point, and now he had to deal with the consequences. Their financial situation started deteriorating. Without Tiffany's income, and with David working alone, they couldn't pay the bills. They started falling behind on rent, on car payments, on everything. David called me once, must have been like in March of this year, asking if I could lend them money. I told him no, that I wouldn't even consider it after everything they'd done. He got angry, told me I was selfish, that we were family, and had to help each other. I reminded him that when I needed help with childcare, his wife called the police on me. So don't talk to me about family. By April, things were already unsustainable for them. David was practically living with Mom to avoid being at his house. Tiffany was alone with the kids most of the time, and their landlord gave them an eviction notice. They had nowhere to go. Well, technically they had one place. Tiffany's parents lived like 3 or 4 hours from here. But according to David, they didn't want to go back there because the relationship with the in-laws was bad too. They had no choice eventually. In May, they moved back in with Tiffany's parents. They packed everything in a weekend. David came to say goodbye to Mom, didn't even try to say goodbye to me, and they left. Mom was sad because they were her grandchildren and her son, but honestly, I just felt relief. A relief that they'd finally gone. That Mom could recover, that I didn't have to be on constant alert waiting for the next crisis call. It's been like 6 months since they left. Mom is much better. Her blood pressure returned to normal levels. She's resumed her activities with her friends. She even looks younger. I talk to her almost every day, and I don't hear that tiredness in her voice anymore. David sends me messages occasionally, trying to make peace, I guess, but I ignore them. I didn't block him like Tiffany, but I don't answer him either. I simply have nothing to say to him. My kids asked me recently why they don't see their cousins anymore. I explained it to them in terms they could understand, that sometimes adults have problems that can't be fixed, and that it's okay to distance yourself from people who hurt you, even if they're family. I don't know if they completely understood, but they nodded and kept playing. Kids are resilient. More than you think. Last week, Mom casually mentioned that Tiffany had called her, asking if they could visit her with the kids at Christmas. Mom asked me what I thought, if she should say yes. I told her it was her decision, that I wasn't going to tell her what to do, but that if they came, I wouldn't be there. Mom sighed and said she'd probably tell them no, that she still wasn't ready to see them. And honestly, I don't know if she'll ever be ready. I know I'm not. There are people who've told me I'm too harsh, that I should forgive because it's family, that the kids aren't at fault. And they're right about one thing. The kids aren't at fault for any of this. But I'm not responsible for fixing the messes Tiffany creates. I'm not responsible for sacrificing my mom's health or my own peace of mind because someone decided that rules and consequences don't apply to her. I've learned that you can love someone, or be related to someone, and still decide you don't want them in your life. And that's okay. It's more than okay. Sometimes I still get angry when I think about everything, especially when I think about my kids crying on that porch with the patrol cars outside. But I also feel something else, like a kind of peace knowing I did the right thing, that I set boundaries and maintained them even though others told me I was wrong. Mom is alive and healthy, my kids are fine, and I can sleep peacefully knowing there's no toxic drama poisoning our lives every week anymore. And if that makes me the bad guy in the version Tiffany and David tell, well, so be it. I know my truth, and that's enough.